Thank you for joining me today for my 11th live session recorded at the Barn Theatre in Cirencester. The subject for today is how will the voluntary and charitable sectors emerge from the coronavirus lockdown? The past 3 months have been very difficult as we've been distancing from our friends and family, changing the way we live to protect lives. The difficulty of this unprecedented period has brought people and communities together as we rallied to support one another through the lockdown. To discuss the tremendous work that large numbers of charities, volunteer organisations and indeed individuals have been doing and the challenges that lay ahead for this sector as we move on to the next phase of lockdown, I am very pleased to be able to welcome a panel of illustrious experts. Amanda Howard, CEO of Cotswold Friends. Jane Gummer, founding member and honorary secretary of CHYP, Cirencester Housing for Young People, and chairman of the Bowley Alms Houses. Karen Czapiewski, Cirencester coordinator for the Long Table. Amanda Davis, I am delighted to be joined with in the studio here, who is a member of the Cotswold Conservation Board, a member of the Bourton Parish Council, and coordinator of the Bourton Street Volunteers. And special thanks go to Canon Graham Morris, Vicar of the Parish Church in Cirencester, who will start us with a non-denominational thought for the day. Canon Graham, thank you very much for being here.
Sir Geoffrey, thank you for your welcome, for the invitation. It's good to be with you this afternoon. Indeed, these last 10 weeks have provided us with many challenges, but also wonderful opportunities as we seek how best to respond to the needs of our community. As a church community here in Cirencester, we have stood shoulder to shoulder with our Chamber of Commerce and all involved in the business community of this fabulous town. We've had to resist the calls for us to open the doors, recognizing the serious impact that that has on us spiritually, pastorally, and financially. Indeed, we've had to and still continue to experience the pain that others experience whose businesses rely on footfall and direct contact with the general public. But for us and so many who are involved working alongside the voluntary sector, the rewards have been considerable. The ingenuity and creativity that has emerged as a result of the restrictions imposed. Churches of every denomination and none have worked at providing a servant model of service to their community, inspired through the example of Jesus, who encourages us to see our neighbour as ourselves. This blurring of the boundaries and softening of the edges, I believe, has brought us all together in a very positive way, and none more so than the work of churches together in Cirencester, where under the guidance and the encouragement of Peter Langman, the church's response has been phenomenal. For ourselves, the parish's shopping service has provided 227 shops for individuals and households. The church buddy scheme ensuring contact via telephone and email, Zoom coffee mornings, Bible studies, and of course streaming of worship. Far from our churches being closed, we've all been as busy as ever, providing spiritual care for our wonderful town. There's always the concern of keeping that safe distance and social distancing, and the spike in Korea must alert us all to the way in which we take the requests from government seriously. The relaxation of the rules can lead to a complacency, and the last thing that we want is for a surge in the infection rate this autumn. That would be devastating. So we all need to keep on doing our bit. There will always be those areas of our life, both private and public, where at times things become blurred. And it doesn't matter who you are, politician, journalist, vicar. Sometimes for all the best intentions, we get it wrong. What matters is how we then respond. And I know in my own context, I'm grateful to those friends who hold me to account for my words and my actions. Speaking truth to power is important. Sometimes we do things and we don't like the way others interpret our action. But what matters in those instances is that we are humble enough to admit our failings. Looking forward, I don't want things to return to the old ways. People have always mattered. It's just that we haven't made time for them. In terms of the world around us, it's time to awake and smell the roses, time to appreciate the seasons. They've always been there. It's just that we haven't taken the time to stop and appreciate them. The world has to slow down. We have to become less centered on self and more focused on living in harmony with each other and indeed globally. Thank you, Sir Geoffrey.
If I may say, that was absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much for those really deep, insightful thoughts. Really grateful. So what I'd like to do now is to move straight to our panel session. Obviously, Canon Graham, you've really, by your daily thought, have introduced yourself. But you'd want to just say a little tiny bit about your work in Cirencester. You were saying in the brief introduction before we came on air about how long you've been in Cirencester and how you've found the experience.
Thank you. Yes, I've been the vicar here and will be 2 years in September. And it's an incredible community. I love the buzz of the community. I love the opportunity that the church has to be engaged at all levels of town life and civic life. And it's been an enormous privilege to be part of developing those links across the community, working with local councillors, working with our schools. It is fabulous. And perhaps I'm one of those who's a bit unusual, that I'm very excited about the new developments also that are coming into Cirencester and all the opportunity that that brings for us. And I think for us working in the church, the real challenge is the way in which we then bridge that gap between those of the old Cirencester, as it were, and those of the new who will be coming to make their homes amongst us. So I find it an incredible place to be, and I just wished I'd come here earlier, years ago. So I'm glad that I discovered Cirencester and got the job.
I think Cirencester is very lucky to have such an enthusiastic champion. So thank you for that introduction. There's a host of questions arising from that. Let's go on to Amanda. We're going to have to, I don't know how we're going to differentiate between you. Amanda H, I think, or unless you have a nickname, Amanda. Amanda Howard, who's CEO of Cotswold Friends. Just briefly introduce yourself, please.
Sorry, I don't have a nickname. Sorry.
You're Amanda
AH would be fine.
You're Amanda H.
So I'm the CEO of Cotswold Friends, which is a community charity which started in 1978 in the North Cotswolds with an office in Bourton in Marsh. The charity provides 4 community services supported by around 400 volunteers, and we support about 2,000 older and vulnerable people in the community. The services are transport, carer respite, befriending and community activities. Of course, our services have changed a little now, but perhaps I will talk about that later.
Yes, thank you for that, Amanda. Jane Gunner, you're a founding member of CHYP, which has been a real... it's been fantastic in Cirencester, and it's had its ups and downs, but you've stuck with it. Just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, Cirencester Housing for Young People, CHYP, supports vulnerable young people between the ages of 16 and 25. We run a supported accommodation unit in Cirencester, and we hope to move young people out into the world better equipped than when they came to us. And it has certainly been a challenge over the years with funding and the perception. There's sometimes people want things to be big, sometimes they want them to be small, but CHYP has had such a wonderful support from the community throughout the 30 years plus that it has been here, that I can only say that we are still here and we are still determined to continue providing the service going forward. So thank you, yes. And I'm also chairman of the Bowley Almshouse Trust, which is 16 almshouses in Watermoor Road, which was originally set up by the Quaker, as a Quaker family, and it is again providing accommodation for elderly people who would not otherwise, well, they fall between the stools of not having accommodation of their own, rented, or being able to, or owning their own property, and so we're pleased to support them.
Karen Czapiewski, you and I met, of course, in the cause of volunteering, but introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Well, the Long Table is part of the Grace Network from Stroud. It's supported, including financially, by the Diocese of Gloucester, and provides opportunities for people to share food. It's about building community over shared meals. When the crisis hit, there was an immediate, urgent need identified to make sure that those who were vulnerable, food vulnerable, be that economically or physically, received home food, lovingly cooked, across the Diocese of Gloucester. And I've been working in the Cirencester area, where the vast majority of people have been referred by other agencies, such as the Churn Project and Food Bank. And I've been coordinating the volunteer drivers, who are a motley bunch, including Sir Geoffrey.
I'm not sure how I react to the motley bunch, but it doesn't matter. As long as the job is done, that's the most important thing. Thank you, Karen. And finally, by no means least, I'm joined in the studio, as I said earlier, by Amanda Davis. She chose to come into the studio. We are all safely social distancing, but she wanted to be present with us, as she said, actually to see how it's done. So, Amanda, we're delighted to have you. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you very much, Sir Geoffrey. So I'm Amanda Davis, and although I am on the Cotswold Conservation Board and a parish councillor at Bourton on the Water Parish Council, I'm here today representing Bourton Street Volunteers. And we've set ourselves up solely in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and community needs within Bourton. It started out spontaneously with the help, it was really Donna Holland from the Croft Restaurant in our village, who had an outdoor terrace whilst we were all trying to work out what businesses could or couldn't do. We were able to socially distance. She set up a WhatsApp group. We all came together, and Councillor Linda Hicks and myself, the three of us coordinate a group of 145 volunteers now who are assigned to our streets where we live to support the 4,300 residents of Bourton on the Water. And we've been delighted to work with Cotswold Friends, Amanda Howard, thank you, and also with so many other organisations, and with support from Sir Geoffrey and many, many other organisations, Cotswold District Council, Gloucestershire County Council, and so on. Thank you.
So, well, let's stick with you a minute, Amanda. I think you better be Amanda D, unless you have a nickname.
Amanda D's fine.
Amanda D, just tell us what's been the biggest challenge during this dreadful coronavirus lockdown period.
I think time. I mean, it's been so very, very busy, but the minute that we've put calls out to people, the residents have come rushing in. So if people have needed something, then we've tried to provide an instant solution to it. I think communication and the time for the communication. So my role has been staying behind the scenes to be able to fire off emails, to pick up the phone, to ring you, to ring whomever it is that's needed to get the messages across. And when we've asked, we've pretty much found a solution. And
so, picking up Canon's point, Canon Graham's point, when this whole thing is, or at least the lockdown is getting us more or less back to normal, what do you think your organisation will do going forward?
I think at the moment we're starting to diverge into those people who are coming out of lockdown in the socially responsible way, but then you've got those people who are still very much in lockdown, either being protected through shielding or because of having symptoms or because of track and trace, being asked to stay home. And therefore, it's becoming all the more apparent, the big gulf between those who are at home and those who aren't. So for us, we want the message to get out there that we're still very much there for the long term to support people. But as our volunteers are finding that they've enjoyed the whole experience of volunteering, so we would like to strongly encourage them to get in touch with Cotswold Friends, volunteer with them, and I've been delighted to accept to take on the role for Cotswold Friends of trying to recruit and encourage and to signpost people on to other volunteering organisations, but especially Cotswold Friends, to continue the work.
Well, Amanda H, you obviously have a great friend in Amanda D. What I think has been perhaps one of the endearing things about this whole coronavirus, and all of you have mentioned this in your own way, is how all the organisations have been working so well together. Tell us what you've been doing during the coronavirus, the challenges you've had, but particularly perhaps just focus on how you've worked with all the other organisations.
There are about 65 organisations in the North Cotswolds who've come forward with coronavirus support groups, Bourton on the Water being one of the larger ones. And we've immediately, very quickly got in contact with each other and found out what everyone's doing, created a spreadsheet and picked up information about how we can refer people on. Because what Cotswold Friends did in the first 2 weeks of the lockdown was to produce a card which was put through 20,000 doors with the help of groups like Amanda Davis and others across the North Cotswolds and our own volunteers, which just said to people, you're not alone, we can help you, we can do your shopping, we can collect your medicine, we can telephone befriend you, and we can put you in touch with your local community groups who can support you. During the period, I'll just look at my sheet, we've had 25,000 phone calls and emails asking for support over the last 9 weeks. And we ourselves support about 1,000 people a week, and then we triage the calls, as Amanda knows only too well, out to the other community groups and say, you know, shopping is needed, or medication is needed, or a friendly phone call is needed. So I think we've all worked together quite well over the period.
So I on behalf of the people of the Cotswolds, I just want to say to you and to all the other organisations, all the other charity organisations, volunteering organisations, indeed to all those who have volunteered within your organisations, a very sincere thank you. Because one of the things that worried me at the start of this whole thing was we were suddenly going to find somebody, perhaps in a small, isolated rural community, who was suffering in silence. But as far as I can see, there has been so much good work from all of your organisations. I don't think that has happened. Can you be reasonably confident it's not happened?
I think that was our greatest fear to start with. I think we had two main concerns to start with. One, exactly what you've said. As you know, the North Cotswolds is a highly rural area, population of about 33,000. But we've only got 5 very small towns of between 2,000 and 5,000 in population. So we have a lot of people living out in isolated farmhouses and small hamlets. And it really was with the goodwill of the volunteers that we could pop these cards through all the doors. So I very much hope that hasn't been the case. And we've had no feedback that anyone has been forgotten. So I'm feeling quite comfortable that hasn't happened. And of course, the second thing we were worried about is how big would the numbers be who needed support, and would we be able to manage the demand? So we immediately lost, we had about 400 volunteers, and we probably lost about half of them straight away. And that was obviously a concern for us. And then we picked up just over 100 coronavirus volunteers who came to us because they're currently not working and they wanted to help. And because of that goodwill of the community, we have managed to meet everyone's needs. So over the period, we've done about 900, for example, dispensary deliveries. We've done about 600 meal deliveries and shops for people, and simply is because of the goodwill of the community volunteers coming forward. And we've done about 7,500 telephone befriending phone calls. When we reached peak and we felt that we still had capacity to do more, that's the day that we all slept very well that night, because we felt that we really could meet everyone's needs. So they were our two main concerns, and I have to say they've proven not to be a problem.
Well done, you. Let's move the focus now further south in the Cotswolds to Cirencester district and talk to you, Jane, because you must have had particular challenges. Were you able to continue operating your house for young people, or what has happened? Has it had to be evacuated, or tell us what's been going on?
Well, we have two houses, one where the young people share and the staff only visit occasionally, and that has been able to stay open. Our main supported accommodation, the problem was that you had essentially conflicting demands. The young people were essentially able to operate as a household, while our staff, obviously the rules are entirely different as employees and keeping to the regulations for employment. So we did have to close, but we closed the supported unit. But we are at the moment looking very keenly at how to reconfigure the house so that we can actually, going forward, operate. I mean, it will be different. There's no getting away from the fact that because you won't be able to have the same interaction between the young people and the staff, there won't be this, hopefully only in the short term, this sort of family atmosphere, because the regulations and the social distancing won't allow it. But we are optimistic that we can, going forward, find a solution to get back open and, you know, serve the young people again. I mean, obviously we've been serving them anyway out in the community. We've maintained a skeleton staff who've kept in contact with all the young people who need support and have been part of our service. But I think the drive now is to solve that conundrum of how to work safely with the premise of the young people needing a household and the staff needing an office environment.
Thank you. And Karen, tell us a little bit about what you've done, your organisation. And I mean, it's a very clever idea that you've come up with, using the RAU as the centre and everything else. Just tell our listeners a little bit about it all, because it's worked really well.
Yes, it's actually grown out of a project that started in Stroud, and the project as a whole has delivered over 30,000 meals during the crisis. Out of the Cirencester part, the food is cooked by the lovely chefs at the RAU, and the staff there are also packaging, freezing, labelling the food, and then putting it together in line with orders that have been collated by the team in Stroud. Then we've just been organising the drivers to take them out. So in the Cotswold area, we've delivered about 4,000 meals. 500 odd of those have gone to hospital and NHS workers, but over 80% of those meals have been free, and we've identified there's been a real need and people are really grateful to receive them, and they would otherwise have struggled to get good home-cooked food.
So the people I've talked to on the doorstep have really enjoyed the meals, and I'm sure it's the same for the other organisations. Not only is it a vitally needed service, it's actually been very enjoyable as well. So I think that's a great tribute to the chefs. And you don't know probably, but when I returned the cool bag, your vast cool chest last week, I actually bumped into one of the chefs and I congratulated him on the quality of the meals.
Oh, good, good. He's hoping to say hello to you properly next week, actually.
Yes, absolutely. Canon Graham, I want to start with a sensitive subject with you. Talking with my own vicar about the excellent Val Bexon, who I'm sure you probably know, part of your duties as clergyman have been very sad and very tricky, and dealing with families who've lost loved ones and dealing with the difficulties of holding funerals and so on and so forth. I'm sure you've been able to be of huge comfort to those families, but would you like to just say something about that very difficult aspect?
Yes, thank you. It's been quite a challenge, really, and also for me, a lot of my colleagues here who are beyond the age of 70 and have what's called permission to officiate have had to stand down. So the lion's share of the funerals has come through me. And that's been quite a challenge without my colleagues providing some of the pastoral work and the preparatory work for the funerals. I don't think I would have been able to cope with that demand that's been placed upon me. What has been really tricky is you've got those few moments that each of the three crematoria, Cheltenham, Swindon, and Royal Wootton Bassett, which we've been using, all have different policies in terms of what you can do with families. And those rules are only just beginning to relax. The difficult one was at Cheltenham, where for a considerable number of weeks, we've had to conduct the funeral under the canopy outside the main doors. And then the awful business of having done a short service with the coffin still in the hearse, then just myself has gone in to the crematorium, leaving the family standing outside. And that was really harrowing to deal with. And as the weeks have gone on, it's become more and more difficult to cope with that. And so you come away from doing the service feeling that you've not really satisfactorily completed your work. What we've been trying to say to the families is, look, we will get a chance to come together when the restrictions are lifted, and we'll have a memorial style service, either individually or collectively, so that people can come into our churches and really have that celebration. So, it's been quite tough. One such funeral was here in Chesterton Cemetery, where all of the family were placed under restrictions, so couldn't travel. And we had to Zoom the funeral service, and trying to create that sort of right ambience where you're feeling pastorally sensitive, but with no comeback. You can't, when you can't see people's faces, you're not quite sure how what you're saying is being received. And so it's been quite a testing time. And I've just been enormously grateful to the support I've received from my retired colleagues who have been there to help pick me up when at times, if I'm honest, Sir Geoffrey, at times it's got a bit overbearing. But we've been there and we've managed to conduct every funeral that the undertakers in Cirencester have put our way, and an enormous privilege. And I look forward to that day when we can have quite a celebration, a memorial service in each of our 3 churches.
So you've had one of the toughest jobs of the entire coronavirus, because not only have you had to deal with all that aspect of your work, you've also presumably had to deal with individuals and families who've actually been affected by the lockdown because of coronavirus. And you presumably had to, I don't know, telephone them or visit them with social distancing, or how you've been able to minister to all your flock during this crisis.
Absolutely, and I think that's where where our buddying scheme has worked well. But particularly, I think in terms of the pastoral opportunities that we've had, my retired colleagues have been fantastic in the support they've given, so that we've managed to maintain that telephone contact. And it's not just the funeral families, Sir Geoffrey, it's also the couples that we've been working with who've had their weddings postponed. We've got 5 weddings that we're not sure whether they're going to take place this autumn, and we're not sure what numbers are going to be allowed to attend. But also being alongside those couples who've been planning things, in some cases, for perhaps over 2 years. So then having to rearrange those events, we've tried to work with them, sort of staying alongside them, and picking up some of the horror stories, not from the church side, I have to say, but from those who've had their wedding venues, they've had them cancelled. They've entered into arrangements where considerable money will need to change hands if they are to guarantee their same date next year. So picking up the pastoral stuff around that has also had its own challenges. But Zoom has been fantastic. Our wedding interviews have been taking place by Zoom, and what is really interesting, when the one agree with the other, they can mute them. So perhaps that's something to do with marriage guidance as we go forward in terms of following up on a Zoom call. But it's been a good experience in the main, and incredibly to be the vicar of the town in these times. And we have received as a family fun. Appreciate it.
I think we were losing your line a little bit, so perhaps while the technicians have a look at that, we might move to Amanda H. above you on the screen. Amanda, you've obviously, you and your organisation have supported a huge number of people. Are you finding the demand is beginning to drop now as people have got into if there is such a thing, as a more normal life during lockdown, or is the demand still just as much as it ever was?
The number of calls we're receiving has dropped. And I do feel that a lot of people have now got their shopping arrangements in place, their pharmacy deliveries in place, their dogs are being walked, their bins are being put out. They've been matched to local support. So number of calls have dropped significantly. So last week we received 2,500, which was down from 4,000 at its peak. So that's dropped by about 50%. But level of service that we're providing isn't yet dropping. So what we are now finding, and our concern now, is mental health. So we're now looking at launching new services where we can provide activity and community to people in homes. So that's our current task. And of course, for us, therefore, there's now an increase in work and an increase of people to connect with.
I have raised the issue of mental health during our weekly calls with all the heads of the various trusts, and the Health and Wellbeing Trust, I think, are thinking about this mental health problem very carefully, and I suspect their services, sadly, at the end of all this, are going to be greatly in demand. But I think what you're doing on that side sounds fantastic, and I think the mental health problems are right across the piece, aren't they? They stem from youngsters right through to old people.
I believe so, yes. I think that there are definitely going to be very significant challenges. I think as well as the volunteers, a lot of the community volunteers have come in contact with people who are really struggling, and they've then had to live with that, worried about that person alone at home who said they don't want to live anymore, they don't want to come through the coronavirus, they're so lonely, they're so isolated, they're so anxious. And it's a lot for a volunteer who isn't in an ordinarily supported community volunteer role. It's a lot for them to have to manage by themselves. So I think the volunteers may also need some support at the end of this. But certainly people in homes who we've supported through the years with men in sheds and knit and natter and lunch clubs and things, we're now having to find ways to provide that community connection within the home. And that's the next step, really, I think.
So have you been in touch with the Health and Wellbeing Trust to say, look, this is what we're finding and this is where we think there will be a need, so that they can...
Yeah, indeed. And we've been given some very helpful guidance. So we've been told to help connect people to nature, try to encourage people to exercise, even if it's a very gentle seated exercise in the home, try to encourage people to look out of the window and be a little bit more outward facing and so on. So we've just created an activities newsletter, and the front page is all about that. And it's all about how people can help themselves and how we're there to support them with that. So, for example, we've launched a jigsaw puzzle club, we've launched a book club, and we can deliver materials to people's homes for arts, for crafts and things, and help support them to do these activities in home. And then by way of creating an in-home community, we can take photographs and exchange book reviews and so on through the newsletter. So it will hopefully bring people closer together and provide a little bit of humour as well, so that gives people something to smile about, which I think is really very important at this time.
I agree. We all need something to smile about. We all need to have something to look forward to. For most of us, it will be meeting our loved ones and our families. I haven't been able to see my grandchild for whatever it is, 10 weeks, and I'm going back to Parliament this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing her, which I shall be able to do it with a 2-metre isolating on her doorstep, no doubt. Jane, you deal with very vulnerable youngsters. Is the problem of mental health something that concerns you?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even before the lockdown, it was clear that mental health is a big issue with the young people generally. And so, of course, there has been a great need to ensure that the young people do have somewhere they can call and speak to somebody, particularly when they know our staff. Our staff have been working with young people for so long that they're sort of very much part of that community. And so the young people know that they can come and speak, well, not come, but ring and be able to unload basically on our staff. And we find, in fact, that even normally when not in lockdown, that young people who have been with us years before continue to benefit for that with that interaction with the staff. So yes, it is very much a sort of in loco parentis sort of format to try and support these young people.
So we all know that the transition from childhood to adulthood, your sort of age, the adolescent age, is one of the most difficult phases in life. Do you worry about, you can obviously only help a certain number because you've only got a certain number of places in your houses. Is it your sense in Cirencester, maybe I'll come back and ask Canon Graham this as well, is it your sense that in Cirencester and the surrounding area there is a large unmet need for adolescents with at least guidance, possibly mental health problems?
Yes, it's a very hidden thing, because with young people, if they haven't immediately got somewhere to live, they will sleep on their friend's sofa for a week, and then until they become a nuisance, and then they move on, and so on. So it is not something that is always immediately obvious to the general public, but very much there is this underlying need for support with young people generally. And I think that we do have our concerns that it is going to be even greater going forward if there is the lack of opportunity that people are predicting for the youth.
So I'm going to come back to Canon Graham now, because the rest of you don't know, but I know that he's got a very important thing he needs to get to at 4 o'clock, and you need to leave, Graham, at about 10 to 4, is that right?
Yes, thank you.
I don't know whether the sound problems...
He said yes.
Yes. Are the sound problems all right? Can you hear me all right? Can I hear you?
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
No, I fear not. That's a real shame. Well, we'll leave it to the tech... I don't know if you can hear me. We'll leave it to the technicians to see if we can get the sound back, because we'd very much like to have you back. Perhaps when they give me a wave or something, if they think it's back. So let's come to you, Karen. What I'm longing to know from you is, you've been a really successful organisation. Do you think you will carry this on after the lockdown has largely ceased, or what are your plans?
The main difficulty for this particular bit of the project is funding. Government support's come to an end. So this phase, this crisis reaction phase, has finished now, but we're aware that there are still vulnerable people who need food. So it's still open to those vulnerable people to ring and book meals, and we will carry on through June for those people. Beyond that, I think that the main focus of the project before the crisis hit was about shared food, building community through meals together. And I think that bit of the project will continue to grow, where you get combinations of people who can afford to pay, people who can't, eating together, home-cooked food and building community. So the project will continue, but we're not quite sure what it's going to look like. It depends how much support can be gained from local councils, whatever.
So when I've delivered your meals, most people have been very happy to see me, even when I announced the fact that I'm their local member of Parliament, and they probably never voted for me. You've done a great job, and I'm sure people will remember the fact that you've done what you've done during this campaign. And I'm just wondering whether you've given any thought, and I'm going to ask the others all of this, what the silver lining of this coronavirus period is, and from what you've actually done in your organisation, what the lasting benefit is. Can we find a way of perhaps other people providing meals, perhaps doing joint shopping for people, joint medicine collection, just even befriending? I mean, is there something enduring that can come out of all of this?
Yes, I think there is something to be built on there. There will certainly be a model going forward, and it's certainly been a very effective way of meeting the food needs of those vulnerable people. Quite what that looks like, we'll probably find out come August. We'll see how that goes, but there will be something there. Meanwhile, we've developed this lovely team of people volunteering to do the delivering, and that's been a complete mixture of people from students, people who are working, people who are furloughed, people who are retired but under 70. We've had the bishop, we've had all sorts of people doing that delivering, and I think that's been really good as a sense of community as well. So certainly community building and good relationships between different groups of people is all helpful. And I think it will help different sorts of volunteers in different places work together.
Karen, Amanda B, I was wanting to, D rather, I was going to come to you next, but Graham, I believe you want to leave by about 10 to 4, is that right?
Yes, I do, Sir, if that's possible.
Yes, well, let's stick with you until you've got to go for the next 3 minutes. So I suppose the real thing is, what is the silver lining that can come out of all this? You gave us some really deep and important thoughts in your opening remarks about how the community has come together in a time of crisis. How can we, as I was just previously exploring with Karen, how can we make sure that that endures to the benefit of communities after this whole thing is hopefully over?
I think one of the things that I'd like to do is to make sure that once our buildings are open, we've got those spaces where people can come together. I mean, I was going to comment on the mental health thing. Before the church buildings were closed, particularly the parish church, who would come
Graham, I'm really sorry. Perhaps we can get you back another time. Our link is still troublesome, even though the technicians have done their best. I think we perhaps, unless we'll try once more. Can you hear me? No. I think what we'll do is we'll let the technicians let you go, but perhaps in view of what's happened, maybe we can come back and do a special session with you for part of the programme or something. But can I, if you can hear me, thank you. Thank you very much. Amanda, can I come to you? I'm sorry about that. Just tell us what you think is the silver lining that might come out of this whole coronas. I mean, the whole business of communities coming together and how that might carry on afterwards.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm seeing at the moment is that, as I mentioned before, as people are coming out of having to be isolating at home and then going back to work, their family routines are changing. And so they're thinking about the future. They don't know whether they've got a new normal yet. They don't maybe know what that is. But as they're working with that, we don't want to lose them at that point and then go back into their new normal and we've lost the opportunity. So I think what we are finding is so much care and support and connection. And as people go back, we don't want to miss that opportunity. So for us, it's about harnessing it. It's about linking them in, whether it's, as I've already mentioned, linking them into a formal volunteering role like Cotswold Friends, whether it's about very localised, connecting them back in with the church, with the school, becoming a school governor, volunteering with the food bank. A lot of people have been going to give donations and the co-op, for example, has set up some wonderful baskets where you can donate into the food bank, donate into toiletries to thank people. There's been a number of different things like that have been, perhaps they've come about as a result and in reaction to COVID times, but actually they'd be a great idea to continue them on for the future. So we're trying to work out what was right for the moment. The moment has moved on, so let's park that one for now. And what's actually been a really good idea, wish we'd thought of it before but we didn't, and let that be a legacy, a positive coming out of such a horrible situation.
See, I think that actually there's going to be a need for all of your services to go on a little while because we still have a very big shielded group, yes, the elderly and the vulnerable. And we haven't talked much about that group at all, but clearly they will have been locked down in their houses for a very long time. They don't have the ability, like we do, to get out and do the vital tasks of shopping or whatever. The highlight of my week has become my shopping day or afternoon or whatever it is. What can we do for them particularly, do you think?
Well, two things there, and it's a bit of the continuing what we've been doing, and it's a little bit about going into the new longer-term normal. But for us, we set up with Mid-Counties Cooperative in Bourton, which is a major store supplying into or servicing a lot of the villages and towns around us. So our volunteers deliver into a lot of people's home, well, to the doorsteps. And we've got volunteer drivers who are willing to keep that going for a little while longer yet. But let's see, and let's keep talking with the staff about what they might do there. But I would particularly like to answer about older people or other people with particular, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's dementias and so on. I've had a number of people say recently that they're living maybe with their family, and their family wasn't at home, so they had a routine. Their family's now been in lockdown, so they adjusted to family at home. And now the families are beginning to go back to work, the children maybe to school soon. And so their confusion is getting very much affected because their routines are being affected. And people with mental health conditions also saying the same. So for a variety of different reasons, it's how do we react? I think the street volunteers can help to highlight what is needed when. And it won't be that there's a sudden switch and suddenly we've got to change from one to the other, because there are so many different phases to coming out of lockdown. Yeah. So I think it's about being very reactive, very agile, very quick at local level. And I mean, I'm delighted that our parish council in Bourton has been supporting street volunteers and enabling it. And through the politicians, through all of the facilities and the councils and so on, they can unlock the doors when we flag it. And the speed, we need them to react very responsively.
So what you're telling our listeners is that your task is by no means over yet.
Absolutely no means.
Ruth, I'm concerned about that elderly and shielded group. Whether you say you're funded till the middle of June, is there any chance that actually for that group you'll be able to carry on a little longer than the middle of June? Ruth? Sorry, Karen. Oh dear.
We're certainly going to be able to continue to the end of June at least, and then we'll see how that pans out beyond that.
Thank you. And Jane, we've talked about all this morning all about your role with Cirencester young people, but we haven't talked about your other role, which is that of almshouses and elderly people. Can you tell us a little bit about how they are faring and what your ongoing role with them will be?
Well, principally, where those people have had to be shielding, it has been loneliness and deep anxiety about the dangers. And so obviously we have been keeping in regular contact with them, trying to reassure them and trying to help them. But what I really wanted to build on what Amanda D was saying about the volunteering. For us, in the almshouses, a lot of the management committee, and again with the shop volunteers for CHYP, were all in the sort of over 70, and hopefully going forward, all these people that have suddenly been kind enough to volunteer for other things will see that there are wider things that need to be volunteered for. When I first was on the trustees of the almshouses, I was 20 years younger than everybody else on the trustees. That is more than 30 years ago, and I am still one of the youngest. And I think this is something that was highlighted, but in the coronavirus pandemic brought out the fact that, in fact, a lot of the people that are running the community organisations were older than 70. Like the vicar said, his other clergy, where a lot of them were retired and therefore couldn't do the things. So I think that is something we do have to hope goes forward as a silver lining, that the next generation will see the benefits of being part of all these community organisations.
I think that's probably one of the most important things of this session, is to hope that some of our youngsters who've been involved in volunteering will continue to do it in one form or another. And that is a fantastic, if that can be one of the, as you say, one of the silver linings, that would be fantastic. Amanda H., let's give you the last word because we're almost out of time for this part of the programme. What's the silver lining of all this?
I think there are two silver linings that we've particularly been aware of. One, the first is that people have got to know their neighbours better. We're all thinking about each other a little bit more, and we're all spending a little bit more time caring for other people. And I really do hope that that will continue. And I think that the second, as other people have already said, is that a lot of people have volunteered for the first time and they've really enjoyed it. So of the 100 coronavirus volunteers that we've had helping us over this period, over 50 have now signed up to be permanent Cotswold Friend volunteers, and that's just wonderful.
That is fantastic. That's the best news we've heard on the programme. Can I thank you all and all of your volunteers? You've done a fantastic job during this crisis. I think the nation would have been a lot more poorer in every way. I don't just mean monetarily wise, I mean in spiritually and mentally and medically, every way, without all your tremendous efforts. So a very big thank you from all the residents of the Cotswolds and Gloucestershire. Thank you. I think we're now going on to the local update. And so as of Tuesday, the 26th of May, there are a total of 1,365 confirmed cases in Gloucestershire, with 154 in the Cotswolds. Of these, sadly, there have been several hundred deaths in hospitals and care homes, and my deepest sympathies are with those who have lost loved ones. Sadly, there have been far too many deaths in care homes, and I'm well aware of the difficulties care homes are facing in looking after their residents and staff. I applaud the new Train the Trainer scheme initiative, which has every care home should have one dedicated person trained in how best to protect all the residents and staff. I will continue to work with local authorities and with ministers at the Department for Health and Social Care to provide care homes with the correct PPE and providing a comprehensive testing service. The government has introduced 2 tranches of extra funding to local authorities, 1.6 billion in March and a further 1.6 billion in April to support them in meeting the pressures across the large range of public services they offer, along with 1.3 billion via the NHS, specifically to support safe and timely discharge from hospitals into care. On the 13th of May, we announced an additional 600 million to support providers through a new adult social fund to help the care and care home sectors with infection control. And I'm working with several care homes in the district to ensure they get their fair share of this funding. More than 2 million of the personal protective equipment have now been delivered across Gloucestershire in response to this pandemic. And I would like to thank all those who have been working hard across the county to ensure that this milestone was reached. The mobile testing unit will be staying in Gloucester at the Oxford Tennis Centre until Sunday the 31st of May. And I've been urging during my weekly calls with the heads of the Gloucestershire NHS trusts and local authority for a system of testing that means a centralised point is used to accumulate people's tests. And I think this system would go a long way to help people struggling to get tested, including the residents and staff of care homes. The opening of the recycling centres is an issue that has been raised with me on a number of times in this programme, and I was able to raise these concerns directly with the County Council, and now the Foss Cross Centre near Cirencester has been reopened. All trips must be pre-booked with details from the Gloucestershire County Council website. Selected year groups will begin to return to school from the 1st of June. I've spoken to a number of heads of teachers regarding this and have been encouraged by their flexible and innovative approaches to making sure that the reopening will work for their schools. As many will recall, we had a panel on this very subject on the 8th of May. The Gloucestershire Community Hub has been very helpful at frequently asked question page for parents and carers, which can be found on gloucestershire.gov.uk. Councils in Gloucestershire have been allocated an additional £49 million to continue providing essential services and to support those who need it in the most vulnerable communities and businesses across Gloucestershire, and have benefited from the total of 448 million government funding since the beginning of the crisis, helping to support some of the most vulnerable people alongside sectors that have been hardest hit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey, for that incredibly useful update on what's happening in Westminster. Exciting times with us now being able to spend time with our families, maintaining social distance, of course, but we really get a sense that we're moving into a new era of relaxing the lockdown. And I'd also like to add my thanks to the panel for their contributions today. Gave us a real insight.
Just ask the question.
Okay, right. Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. Sorry for that little technical hitch. We've got an interesting number of questions that have come in, some before the question time, some during question time. The first question is more of a comment, and unfortunately Canon Graham had to leave, but I just want to address this issue with that was raised by Rosemary Andrews. She felt that Canon Graham focused far too much on the church rather than on the non-denominational nature of the response that we've enjoyed through people of all faiths and people who have no faith, specifically, to come together to look after their neighbours. I think that Canon Graham actually got the balance right. He addressed it. Do you want to comment on that in terms of our panel?
Rosemary, I hear what you say, but please also bear in mind that we did have some technical problems, and I think had we not had those technical problems, Canon Graham would have been able to broaden out what he had to say. But suffice it to say, I think that he is there to support all denominations in Cirencester, and I hope his deeply thought out opening remarks will have had an effect on all of us.
Thank you. A lot of the questions are related to the question time, which is great to see so many people engaging with this subject, more than we've had on other subjects, and more than the District Council have on their programme, which is really good news to get that engagement. We've got some regular viewers who've commented. Indeed, Amanda D is one of our regular viewers, and she's here. However, there is a question which I think you'll know what the subject is all about. So I'm going to try and deal with this in its best way I can. It started with a gentleman called Hugh Janus on the live stream who said, why did you support Dominic Cummings? I'm not aware that you have supported Dominic Cummings. That's gone on to people say this is not a question time session about Dominic Cummings, but someone else has then said, well, actually, it's open question time, and that you've always said that you'll take questions directly. But before we do touch on and hopefully deal with the Dominic Cummings issue, I'd like to read out a question that we did receive beforehand, which kind of puts the Dominic Cummings situation in context. And it's from someone that we both know quite well, a dear friend of mine. There's a lady called Corinne Lamus. And if you'd allow me to read it out, I think it does address it in a very balanced way. I'd like to pose a question for the question time you attend on Cirencester, Sir Geoffrey. Could Mr. Cummings please apologise for his behaviour? We all make mistakes in life, nobody is perfect, and the mistakes don't necessarily mean we should be sacked from our jobs, but the mistakes should be acknowledged and apologised for. There could have been an accident on their journey to Durham, putting strain on all their emergency services, and especially the NHS, which we were all supposed to be protecting at that time. Apart from the other issues, Mr. Cummings' wife was travelling knowing that she had the virus. How irresponsible was that? It's all very well to say that we should move on, and that this is correct, but the non-acknowledgement of the mistake is what makes it unacceptable and difficult for some of us to move on from. Not all of the general public are amenable and maybe don't understand the restrictions, and that this incident will undermine the government's credibility, given the good work that so many people are doing, including yourself. That is a given, I'm afraid. If it isn't put to bed in a better fashion, then we will all suffer from it for far longer and more lives could well be lost. This is a bit sensitive, Sir Geoffrey, but Mrs. Lamus and her family did suffer a personal loss, which I know she'd like me to read out because it puts it all in context. On the 12th of April, the day Mr. Cummings had his jaunt to Barnard Castle, my daughters lost their father to COVID-19. My instinct as a mother would be to go to them and hold them in my arms. I was unable to do this. One of my daughters is still struggling with her grief and trying to homeschool her children. I am devastated that I am unable to help because of restrictions in place, and we live within 1 mile, not hundreds of miles away from our children. I only mention that this is my own situation to illustrate the feelings of the general public, which I know have already been verbalised by many. But please, please, can we have an acknowledgement and an apology for behaviour that most of us think was inappropriate in these times. I hope you, your family and your friends are keeping well and safe in these difficult times. Corinne is such a well-balanced person and puts these things, so I think that it does address in a very calm way the issue of Dominic Cummings, and I know you'd like to make a few remarks about the Dominic Cummings situation. Can I hand over to you?
Yes, well, Mrs. Lamus, may I first of all offer my deepest sympathies to you on your loss and to your family. That has been one of the really worst aspects of this whole coronavirus pandemic. And it's really sad. And of course I understand why that makes the whole Cummings issue for people like you and many others particularly who've lost some vital member of their family, even harder to bear. So as the Member of Parliament for this area, I am perfectly happy to apologise to anybody who's been upset by his actions. I think the problem for him is if he did apologise, I think the media would be like vultures going at a corpse. It would be he would really be every yard and every aspect of what he did would be examined. So whilst of course he may have been able to handle it better, I am happy to apologise. The Durham Constabulary concluded that an investigation that they should take no further action. The Prime Minister has carried out a thorough investigation and he has decided that he should remain in post, and it's basically the Prime Minister's decision. Cummings did what he thought was the right thing to do, to ensure the welfare of his child was paramount. And I think there have been other people. I've come across other people who have been in similar sorts of situations, and they have said that had it happened to them, they would have been very tempted to take the same attitude. So I can understand why he did what he did. But I am very grateful to all of those who have upheld the lockdown rules during this very difficult period, especially like you, Mrs. Lammas, who have lost ones. And I've received a high volume of emails from constituents, it has to be said, with differing opinions on the Cummings affair, and will of course continue to monitor this situation and have of course passed on all of those views in aggregate to the Prime Minister. But I think it's essential that we now focus on the sensible course to ease the current lockdown, get the country safely back to work and our children starting school safely, and recover from the current COVID dreadful pandemic. And I think we should now look forward and not back.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. And as ever, you've given a very direct answer, which I know a number of viewers appreciate. And I'm looking at you, Amanda. He does give you a straight answer. Interesting that one of our viewers has actually said, it's Ben Logan, get over the Dominic Cummings debate. What about Stephen Kinnock and Ian Blackford, amongst others? It's now a moot point. It's taking up too much time. And certainly today we'd like to focus on some of the other issues. And Steve Jones, who's along with Amanda, regularly comments, he says, I think that's a very balanced comment. Mr. Cummings did what he did, and you've apologised on behalf of you as the MP for his behaviour. I think we just need to move on. Richard Harrison, it's the most vulnerable people in our society who are being shielded currently and are still going to have to stay under lockdown, which surely cannot be indefinitely. How are we going to ensure that community services continue to be focused on servicing their needs and making life better for them? If I could couple that with some comments from people, in particular Steve Jones, who says, unfortunately, there is a situation where we do have a situation that things can go slightly off track, and where people left without help. The community hub in Cirencester is a wonderful organisation that's putting people back on track, and he's been talking to the GCC about the issue and assets that appear to have been unused. Once they were flagged to me, he puts people in touch with the national scheme that gave them help within an hour in all cases, thank goodness. And another comment a bit later on from someone who has been extremely unwell with a daughter home from school and has been very grateful for the help that she's had from the community hub. But that is obviously a Cirencester initiative. I think the question, though, is how can we ensure that we're going to be able to protect people through community services who are still, as you said, the most vulnerable group and are still isolated?
So I don't know, Richard, whether you actually were able to hear our panel discussion, but certainly there was a good chunk in there, particularly towards the end, of how the various voluntary organisations are going to continue to help the elderly and vulnerable, who sadly, for their own safety, are going to have to be locked down for, I think, quite a little bit longer, because this virus isn't going to go away anytime soon. And clearly the social distancing is important. And therefore, I think that's what I was trying to hint at to all our voluntary organisations. I think their services are going to be needed for quite a little while longer yet. And I think Amanda H. was very interesting in the sort of initiative she's been coming up with to help people's at best boredom, at worst mental health problems. The sort of initiatives of keeping people busy, keeping their minds occupied, keeping them exercise where they can, so that hopefully people can be occupied and get over the COVID virus in as best shape as they can.
Thank you.
On the business front, I think that it will be a combination of all the authorities, the government providing the money, the LEP, the county council, the district council, having a recovery plan, and there's a lot of thought being given to that now. And I think that one of the things that could be helped, and I think we've seen this through the pandemic, is the use of the internet to communicate. So businesses, no matter how big or how small, can communicate better with their customers. And hopefully that will encourage at least some of the small businesses to survive and prosper in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. You mentioned the fact that schools are going to reopen, so we've got a question here from Richard Harrison, who says schools are finding a number of practical issues with things like sanitising toilets as they try to put together individual plans, because each school is different, for reopening imminently. Why didn't the government put forward its proposals and consult properly before deciding to push ahead with this? There's this sense that the government's decision to reopen primary schools has been a little bit too quick and that schools are trying to play catch up. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I think, Richard, this is a part of the government's ambition, if you like, to try and get the whole of society back into near normality as soon as is safe to do so in accordance with the medical advice that they're given. And obviously a lot of consultation, I mean the media have been making a lot of mischief about this, but a lot of consultation was had, not with least of which we had a panel here discussing this very subject on the 8th of May. So I think there was a lot of discussion. I don't underestimate how difficult it will be for the individual headmaster, headmistress in every individual school to make sure that the whole environment is as safe as possible. You've hit on one of the areas, which is obviously toilets. How do you clean after each child is going to be difficult. How do you clean in the really common areas that are touched a lot, things like door handles? How do you deal with the canteen? Again, people sitting at the same tables and keeping them all safely apart. And I think above all, as we did explore in depth with the principal of Cirencester College, when they get back into any numbers, how do you deal with the buses and keeping people safe on the transport to and from school and college? So I think there is an enormous challenge with getting children back to school. But I think we've got to start somewhere, and unless we do start somewhere, we won't see what effect it has on a possible spike on the virus, and we need to get children back to school so that their parents can then get back to work. So this is a very difficult thing we have to do. We'll do it cautiously with classes 1 and 6 and 10 and 12 to start with, but hopefully that will go well enough in most areas that we can then start to extend it to other classes.
Richard Harrison has come back whilst you were answering his question to say that perhaps the virus would go away sooner if the government wasn't in such a rush to end the lockdown. I mean, that's the dynamic we have to deal with, which is people who want the lockdown to come to an end and to restart, and then other people, quite rightly, are very concerned about it.
I said this at least 3 weeks ago when I went on the Today programme and was on the front page of the Time. It was a very difficult balance that the government has to do to try and get back towards normality without increasing the incidence of the disease to a dangerous extent. And that is precisely the balance that the government is trying to take.
Okay. Picking up on the issue of young people and mental health, which I think we all recognise as we come out of lockdown is going to be an issue, not just with young people, but for other people. Cressy Landis, who is also a regular contributor, do you think that there may be some more government support for the vulnerable groups who potentially are suffering from mental health issues? Shelters with funding for more trained therapists who can help build resilience up amongst young people. Also shelters for vulnerable women and children. There's such support for the business community from government, but I feel that these people may also need support too. That's a good point. The business community has got a lot of support, but there's a sense that maybe some of the more vulnerable groups haven't. Do you have a view on that?
I'm longing to answer that, David, but there is just one other important point that I want to make to Richard's last question there. And in this very difficult balance that the government have to achieve, of course, they will be monitoring every single area very carefully. And the Prime Minister made it very clear in his press conference yesterday that if we see a spike, an unacceptable spike in any particular area, he won't hesitate to either pause the lockdown in that area or even reverse it. So I think we're going to have to perhaps treat it a little bit differently in different parts of the country, different principalities and countries within the United Kingdom being treated very slightly different according to the progress of the disease. Now, Richard, David, you quite rightly, your questioner quite rightly...
Cressy Landless.
Cressy Landless, you quite rightly raised the issue of mental health. And again, if you had been able to listen to the panel, we did dwell on some time on that. And in my conference call with the heads of the NHS Trust, certainly the Health and Wellbeing Trust is well seized of the need possibly for an increased need for mental health treatment at the end of all this. There are some other issues, particularly with, as your questioner, Cressy, has raised, abused people during the crisis, of children with health and welfare, education, health and plans, who hopefully have been having those plans during the crisis, but if they haven't, they need to be helped when they get back to school. Indeed, one head teacher made it clear to me the other day that part of their job as a head teacher is just to keep an eye on all their children. They know them very well. They see them day in, day out. And if they see them looking slightly differently, they ask them whether they're all right and whether there's something gone wrong. Now, some of the more vulnerable children have missed that overall observation that's been going on by their teachers. So I think there are a lot of reasons why we do need to get children back to school, but I think there are a lot of vulnerable children, a lot of vulnerable young people, and a lot of vulnerable old people that will need mental health at the end of all this, and certainly the Health and Wellbeing Trust is mindful of this. And David, as regard to the money, yes, a lot of money has gone into business, and that's important, because without the businesses surviving when the upturn comes and making the wealth for this country on which tax is paid, on which we can provide the public services, we won't be able to provide those services.
Correct.
But nevertheless, Cressy, a great deal of money is going into the health service at the moment. And both this Prime Minister and the previous Prime Minister has made it very clear in their pronouncements that they want to see parity of esteem and whatever resources are necessary between mental and physical health. So I think the whole area of mental health is becoming much better understood, and therefore the resources going into it are also increasing.
Okay. I'm conscious of your time, and indeed we've still got one of our guests here, Amanda D. So I've got one more question. We have 2 or 3 other questions, but they relate to business rather than the theme of today. But I'm just conscious of time, and you've got your Westminster brief to give us in a minute. So if I could just take this one final question, then we'll deal with the other ones next week, because our theme next week is business, and the questions tend to be related to business. So this one is to do with tourism, which we touched on last week, but didn't get the chance to talk about it. Mixed messages about the Cotswolds being open, and this is from I think it's from Elizabeth Hodges, who is Chipping Campden Town Council and also a member of the Cotswold Conservation Board, so a colleague of yours, Amanda. One of the things that the government has forgotten to consider is the fact that if people are going to travel, they're going to require public conveniences to be open. There are several reports of people's gardens and general countryside being used as a public convenience, which probably causes as much public health hazard as COVID-19. Could Sir Geoffrey use his best endeavours with HMG to ensure that public conveniences can be opened during the period of moving back to normality? But it does touch on a huge host of other things. So that will be my last question to you, Sir Geoffrey, and then if you could give us an answer and then take your Westminster update. Thank you.
So I recognised this as a problem last week because it was clear that although places like Bourton had signs up on the fosse saying they were closed, it was clear that a considerable number of people were still going to come to Bourton, and if they were going to come, they needed to use the loos. So I appealed to the Cotswold District Council to open the loo, their 2 loos in Bourton before the bank holiday weekend. I think they have, Amanda, I think, told me before the programme that they have now reopened them. and that is really good news. But what I am going to take the opportunity of doing now is to appeal to the Cotswold District Council to open all their loos across the district. I heard the other day that there were problems in Lechlade. Now, just to briefly, if I may, David, explain the difficulties. It might seem a very easy thing to just unlock the key and open a loo. It's not as simple as that. You've got to clean the loo carefully between each person. You've got to make sure there is social distancing going in and out of the loos. So basically, you've got to have supervision and cleaners there at all the hours that they are opened. So this is expensive, but nevertheless, where there are hotspots like Bourton, it was my contention that they should be opened rather than people having to find less desirable places to go to the loo, and that in itself could present a health and safety hazard. So I think the short end to that question, David, is I appeal to the District Council to open all of their loos, and everybody else, like Mr. Hackling in Bourton, I don't know whether his loos are open, but he should open them too, and he should make sure they're properly cleaned and supervised.
Okay, we're now going to move to your Westminster brief.
So, for all the guidance and the latest information on the corona, please go to the government's website, www.gov.uk/coronavirus. All the updates I'm about to discuss can be found in much fuller detail on that website. The Prime Minister yesterday set out a carefully designed package to ease the burdens of lockdown to keep the virus under control. He announced a series of measures that will be introduced from Monday the 1st of June, covering 3 key areas: schools, social contact and retail. Firstly, schools will begin to reopen, as we've already said today, from the 1st of June, and will be reopening done in a safe way, to start with nurseries and other early years settings, reception, year 1 and year 6 in primary schools. On the 15th of June, secondary schools will begin to provide some of the face-to-face contact time for years 10 and 12. Secondly, on Monday, outdoor markets and car showrooms will be able to reopen if they can meet the COVID secure guidelines. On the 15th of June, the government intends to reopen other non-essential retail if they can meet the guidance. And I imagine that will mean things like pubs with a large garden, but again, maintaining social distancing. From Monday, up to 6 people can meet outdoors, including gardens, providing those from different households continue to strictly observe social distancing rules. Please visit the government website, as I've already said, for any questions you may have, and there is a great deal of information available. I realise that what I'm doing is going through it rather quickly. Fourthly, I am aware that the daily coronavirus case number is still quite high. Therefore, these new measures will be constantly monitored, and the Prime Minister has made it quite clear that if necessary, the government will pause or reverse those measures in particular local areas. The new NHS test and trace service will launch across England, helping us keep the virus under control while carefully and safely lifting the lockdown nationally. The new scheme will mean anyone who tests positive for coronavirus will be contacted by one of the 25,000 contact tracers, and they will help to trace anyone who had been in close contact with the infected individual, ensuring that they too isolate for 14 days, thereby avoiding them unknowingly spreading the virus. This is important. Please remember that if you are contacted by the NHS Test and Track service, you will not be asked to provide any passwords, bank account details, or PIN numbers. This is to ensure that you are not scammed by fraudsters over the phone. We have extended testing to all symptomatic individuals in England, helping to continue to monitor the virus and take appropriate action quickly. Anyone with a new continuous cough, high temperature, or a change in their sense of smell or taste can immediately report these symptoms and book a test at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Expanded testing availability for children under the age of 5 will be available to help support the phased opening of schools and childcare settings in England from the 1st of June. Thank you very much for listening to this programme. I hope you found it interesting. As always, we always welcome your questions, however critical, but above all, we welcome your participation. Thank you very much indeed, and a big thank you to David for comparing the programme, and as always, to the Barn for all their people. And they've had some problems today, not of their own making, but it's great to have the team at the Barn helping with this show. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey, for that incredibly useful update on what's happening in Westminster. Exciting times with us now being able to spend time with our families, maintaining social distance, of course, but we really get a sense that we're moving into a new era of relaxing the lockdown. And I'd also like to add my thanks to the panel for their contributions today. Gave us a real insight into the challenges and issues confronting the voluntary sector, and we look forward to welcoming them back on a future occasion and working more closely with them as we go forward. I'd like to end today's live session with Sir Geoffrey with two videos, one featuring Lyndon Stowe and a young lady called Ashley up in Mickleton, who has been devoting the last 2 months to making laundry bags. And that's a fascinating story of voluntary work. And following that by a short video from Councillor Richard Morgan, who is going to introduce the mobile breast scanning service that takes place in Tetbury. It's a phenomenal charity, and they've been carrying on providing that very useful service, and delighted to introduce those two videos. So thank you very much for watching this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
And welcome to a lovely sunny North Cotswolds. Today I'm with Ashley Nichols, one of our local entrepreneurs. Now Ashley, tell us what happened on March the 7th.
On March the 7th we opened up a small beauty salon and boutique in the heart of Mickleton community. And then shortly after, 2 weeks later, on the 21st, we had to close due to COVID-19.
Now most people would have moped around and wondered what to do and sat on their bottom and literally done nothing. Perhaps just enjoy the weather, but not Ashley. So Ashley, tell us, what did you do? What did you get up and going?
Well, we actually set up a North Cotswold sewing support group where we were able to make laundry bags and headbags to alleviate the sores that go when people put masks behind their ears. We were up and running quite quickly, and then we hit about 150 volunteers, and as of Tuesday this week we have done 14,000 items.
14,000 items. Now, is that just for Gloucestershire and maybe locally in Warwickshire?
No, we decided that we weren't going to. We obviously wanted to support the local community where possible, but we're lucky we have huge sewing support groups locally. So we have sent items to the Isle of Skye, Glasgow, and all the way down to Southampton.
It's brilliant. Just show us what sort of thing you were making.
So here are the laundry bags themselves. They're very versatile. This is one that's been nicely embroidered. Here's one for perhaps more of a male. We've catered for all kinds, and they can be utilised for uniforms, for shoes, for any items, anyone that's frontline really. So police, ambulance, community nurses, and this at the moment we are looking to go to school teachers and nurse assistants.
Actually, I know you'd like to thank everybody who got stuck in and helped you along the way, but can I say a really big thank you, because this was inspirational and it really was a brilliant initiative, and that was down to you. So I know you put a great deal of hard work into this, so thank you for what you've done.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Lyndon. I have to say though, teamwork does make the dream work.
I'm in the Priory Industrial Park just outside of Tetbury, next to the Tesco. I'm meeting an excellent charity called Hope for Tomorrow, who supply vehicles where mobile cancer treatments can take place in rural locations away from hospitals. So it's a fantastic charity, and I'm going to meet up with them now to discuss how they've been impacted by COVID-19 situation.
Hi, I'm Tina Seymour. I'm the Chief Executive of the charity Hope for Tomorrow. Hope for Tomorrow brings cancer care closer to people's homes, their community. It saves people time, it saves people money. We have a fleet of mobile cancer care chemotherapy units, and in fact the world's first was launched in Gloucestershire 13 years ago. We're really proud of what we do, and we believe that quality care close to home is the future for cancer patients, and that everybody should have this sort of treatment, really. All our funding comes from fundraising and voluntary donations, grants and trusts, those sort of areas. We get no statutory funding from the government at all. So we work really hard within communities trying to raise funds to make the availability of cancer care closer to home happen for people. Each unit costs £265,000 to actually build, so a capital build is £265,000, and the longevity is about 10 years on average use in each area. Well, immediately we lost 85–86% of our income within the first week, which was huge for us. Obviously, our fundraising comes from mainly events, community groups, people doing things in their homes and together. And obviously all of that was cancelled or postponed. We launched an emergency appeal online, and people have been really supportive, and we're trying to get through the first 3 months by raising funds through that method. We've been innovative. Our fundraising went down, so our income went down immediately, but the need for these units went immediately up, which is slightly different to most charities, I think. And we were approached by 22 NHS trusts saying, can we have one of your units? We did what we could. We used our reserve vehicles and allocated those. I had a new build which was being launched in the autumn, which I've also given to another NHS trust to help with capacity and take people out of wards where there was a possibility of COVID virus being and putting them into a safe and secure environment. But what has been incredible during this time is the way that our NHS partners have really utilised the units. They've made these safe havens for patients to go and have their treatment. These are patients with very, very low immune systems, and they have to have chemotherapy or other drugs or other treatments like blood transfusions. They go on board, they're PPE'd as well as the staff that are PPE'd, but it's a really relaxed and friendly environment. And what they've done is extended the working hours, and so that more patients can get on board, so that more patients could be going through that system rather than losing their treatment and that availability. We have tried to be innovative and use the resources that we've got. We've cut costs. Sadly, I've had to furlough some staff to help with the cost cutting, and we're doing whatever we can to reduce costs wherever we need to. Really, we're a small organisation. I've got more vehicles in my fleet than I have staff. I think my fleet is around, including cars, around 29–30 vehicles. And there's only 13 of us here, many of us which are part-time, so it's tough and we're very lean, but that has its added benefits as well, because we don't have the huge overheads of some charities, but it's really difficult. We're not a big name, we're not known nationally, we don't spend money on advertising and promotion, so we will carry on doing what we're doing and hopefully get through this really difficult time. And as lockdown starts to come out, people will start doing things, I'm sure, bakes, outdoor events, those sort of things will start to happen, and hopefully our income will start to come on board again. I think that what's really important for us is that we're a local charity, we punch above our weight, we work really, really hard. Any support is always really welcome, and we appreciate every penny, not pound, but penny that people give us. We make amazing things happen for cancer patients. We give people the time to be with their families or just recover. And if you've ever supported us, thank us. I just wanted to thank you very much. And if you're thinking about supporting and want to know more, please have a look at our website. There's lots of information out there, and come and join our family.
In March 2018, we opened our doors to the public with a vision not just to create challenging professional theatre, but to use this as a platform to inspire and bring communities together. Theatre and culture build identity. With theatre and culture in our local life, the community landscape is more vibrant. Local life is enriched. We believe that the benefits of theatre should be available for everyone. Our Theatre for All programme has removed financial barriers, giving disadvantaged people access to the theatre free of charge.
So we were told that we'd come here and have a Christmas meal and then go and watch A Christmas Carol.
Our aim is to make live professional theatre available to everyone and use that experience for positive change. Theatre can be transformational in young lives. Our academy is now in its 4th year, and we continue to build on our vision of bringing the best performing arts tuition to the heart of the Cotswolds. We work hard to make our academy as inclusive and as accessible as possible. Discounts apply for parents with more than one child. Our bursaries help support talented children from less affluent backgrounds. The Academy creates a fun and challenging environment where children can build friendships and develop key skills not just for theatre, but for life. We are also able to provide real opportunities for students who wish to pursue careers in the arts.
My name is Harry Apps. I am currently playing Marius in Les Miserables in the West End.
Barn outreach and learning programs engage with thousands of people. Our free workshops support the drama curriculum in local schools. Singing and musical theatre workshops in community groups and care homes have helped address issues of isolation. Our Song for Cirencester project in aid of mental health charities brought our community together in an unprecedented way. We've collaborated with many charities in the region, including the Churn project, to support individuals dealing with the barriers to finding work.
Since working at UN, my life's changed. It's given me some purpose, given me an interest, some confidence I was lacking prior to all this.
The Barn Theatre played a pivotal role in the town's 2018 World War I centenary celebrations. Who could forget our record-breaking Human Poppy? Our live streaming work on the annual Advent Festival helped thousands engage and take part in Cirencester's Christmas festivities. In these times of uncertainty, we strive to keep the community together. The theatre may be temporarily closed, but our commitment to you goes on. Even now, our amazing costume department are helping the NHS by making scrubs for frontline workers. We've used our technology to build a free live streaming service that provides much needed community news and entertainment for all the family, broadcasting every day to keep us all connected. We are not just a theatre. We are the Barn.